so many young people are told you just have to wait for your time. You have to wait for the moment, wait a couple years, get experience. Well, I don't buy that. I think being young is like the ultimate superpower.
Too many hardworking people feel trapped making money, but never finding meaning in it. But imagine if your money could fuel joy, purpose, and impact instead of stress. Today's guest, Derrick Kinney, America's financial educator and best-selling author of Good Money Revolution, turned that dream into a movement. After building and selling one of the nation's top financial firms, he's now teaching millions how to go from middle class to millionaire by using money as a force for good. Get ready to transform the way you think about wealth, purpose, and success. I'm Larry Sprung, your host for the Midland Money Mindset and founder and wealth advisor of Midland Financial. Let's dive into the show. Well, I am excited to have Derrick Kinney, best-selling author of Good Money Revolution. And I have to add in, he's a good friend of mine. So welcome to the show, Derrick.
Larry, thanks so much. This is going to be the highlight of my entire week being on your show. So thanks for having me today.
Well, we'll have to save that for the end and the final question then, but we'll hold the listeners in suspense for now. But right. So Derrick, listen, I know a lot about you. Our audience and our listeners are always enamored with the journey because everybody's journey is a little bit different, but also similar at the same time. So, we'll talk about a lot about what you're doing with Good Money Revolution and everything you're up to today. But can you share a little background of how you got to where you are today and what led you on this entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, so it's funny. I became a financial advisor at age 26. But I didn't go into finance initially. I actually took one finance class in college. That was it. But I always had this interest in money. I enjoyed making money, saving money. I actually would lend money to my parents. I had this amortization chart on the back door of my bedroom, and they would sort of kind of cheer me along and pay interest on loans I would give them. I just loved money, but I loved it because I could make it, and I could also impact people's lives with it. And I remember back, there was a food pantry at our church, of all things. And I enjoyed, I was working at $3.35 an hour at our grocery store, my first job at age 15. And I just wanted to give back. And so I would put some cash in an envelope and just kind of write with my left hand. I'm right-handed, so they wouldn't know who was giving it. And just the thought of you're working hard to help somebody else's life be better was really, really powerful. So fast forward, I saw my parents struggle financially. And I knew they weren't alone. As I would talk to their friends and they'd come over to the house, everybody had the same frustration of like, how much money is enough? Will I ever be able to retire? Can I ever escape the job I don't like? And can I enjoy the retirement I want? And all these people were all disillusioned, like, no, you just have to keep working. And I decided to become a financial advisor to fight that problem. And so I was working full-time out of college, became an advisor. But the problem I had, Larry, was I was 26. I looked like I was 13. No gray hair, no wrinkles, no big list of country club contacts. But I had this passion for supporting local education. So I began to go back to my local high school, and I gave a Teacher of the Month and a Student of the Month award for the next couple months. And people began to call me and say, hey, Derrick, we want to have you be our advisor because you care about what we care about. And it just taught me it was more than money. Money was important, but when you can give people a doorway to be part of something bigger, they want to be part of that. And that's how we grew the practice.
Amazing. So, that's a great story about how you entered the profession, and we'll talk more about the book. But before I jump in there to give, the listeners a little background, we've known each other for some time now, but it really was a post about smiling that had, Denise, my wife and chief marketing officer, saying that we need to have you on the show. So can we hear that? Why does smiling matter?
Well, it's interesting about this post because one of the passions I've got is investing in the lives of young people. And so as an entrepreneur business owner, one thing I saw lacking in my kids' local high school was there was no real business class or legitimately, at least no one who had ever been in business teaching a business class. And so I decided to launch what I called the Business and Investing Club. And we would teach the young people, high school students primarily, soft skills, how people can know you, like you, trust you. So we did this for about 10 years. I decided to take everything they said when they graduated high school that actually worked. Like, hey, Mr. Kinney, when you taught us how to smile and how to say nice to see you versus nice to meet you, and all of those things open doors for college scholarships, even relationships, even investment opportunities down the road. So I created this course. So I had about 13 teenagers come to the house, and I just had this crazy idea, Larry. I was like, how many of you feel comfortable with your smile? Not one hand was raised. I was like, really? And I said, well, why? And they said, well, I feel like I look goofy when I smile. I feel awkward, like people are staring at me, like I look really crazy. And I said, why don't we do this? So I gave each of them a handheld mirror. And I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at yourself in the mirror, and I want you to see yourself smiling. But more importantly, I want you to see how it feels to have a good smile. And so what I learned was these teenagers were being held back because what we know is a good smile increases your face value, big dad joke there, but it gives them confidence that when they smile, they actually look good. And so then we realized this wasn't just for teenagers. This was for like every adult in the world, that when they smile, it's your face telling someone, hey, I like you. Hey, I can trust you, and I want to be around you. And ultimately, that's the foundation for building any successful business.
Yeah, amazing. Just the smile can make it happen, it sounds like. So now, one thing you left out when you were telling us your background and your origin story, if you will, is that you accomplished something most entrepreneurs only really ever dream of. And that was you got to the top 1% of your profession, the financial services profession, but then you ended up selling the business. Why did you work that way up and then make a conscious decision to sell at that point?
Yeah, great question. So I always enjoy setting big goals for myself. And I would always, when I would go to conferences or events, I found myself automatically like in the first two rows. I just found that when you're at the very front of the room is where the hungriest people are, like around the world. Just go to the first two rows and you're going to meet some really amazing people. So I would go to these advisor conferences that I was invited to, and I wanted to be around other advisors doing better than me. What did they know that I didn't? How did they connect with clients better? How could they serve them better? And I wanted to copy those principles because I wanted to build a world-class financial planning business. So one of the things that I did, I began this about 10 years ago, is I realized I had a problem. I would go so fast, but if I wasn't focused on what I was chasing while going fast, I would run fast in a circle. And that cost me a lot of time and money. So I began to go on what I call a yearly sabbatical. I would take about 5 days completely by myself to think and pray and journal. And I would ask myself 3 questions, Larry. First of all, how do I be a better husband? How do I be a better father? And how do I be a better business owner? So those 3 questions guided what I wanted to do because I realized I needed to take 1 week out of the year to know what to run fast toward the other 51 weeks out of the year. It just made sense to me. Sure. And so I was we were acquiring other businesses. And in July of 2019, I just felt like there was a shift change inside of me. And I asked myself, what do I want to do next? I called it Derrick 2.0. And I began to write out a list of all the things I wanted to do. And I wrote down just uninhibited, write a book, launch a podcast, coach, speak, consult. Could I build another business and replicate the recurring revenue I built up in my current financial business? And I decided to sell. I knew in that moment, if I was thinking about selling, then that was the moment to do it. And so I got to tell you, since you asked, one of the hardest things I've ever done was calling personally the clients that I served. I had about 100 clients that I personally served. I had other advisors in our firm, but I had an experience when I was younger that my longtime dentist of all things, he was more than a dentist to me. We would talk business and life, and it was just a great relationship. I actually looked forward to going to the dentist. One day he dropped the bomb and he says, Derrick, this will be the last time I see you. I'm retiring and selling my business. I felt like somebody had died. like the shock of that was just overwhelming. And for some reason, I made a note and said, if ever I'm in that situation where I could sell a business, I don't want my clients to feel like I just felt being surprised. So I called individually each one of my clients. And I got to tell you, just in all vulnerability, it took me about a month and a half with a busy schedule to call all those clients. The last call I made, I can feel it even now, I literally broke down and wept. The weight of all that. I wanted to make sure my clients felt like they weren't just handed off, they were handed up to even a better advisor than me. That was my goal, was I needed to give them someone else that was better than me to make sure they could go the distance and be well taken care of. But I knew if I'm going to go on to Derrick 2.0, whatever this next is for me, I wanted to make sure that they were taken care of very, very well.
Sure. And you took care of them in a way that, behoves you. I think there are a lot of folks in the same position that wouldn't have made all those phone calls and just let things happen, right? And I think that says a lot about your practice. And I think it says even more about who you are as a person. Imagine a relationship where financial conversations don't feel stressful, but actually bring you joy. We've designed a guide to help you have positive, meaningful money conversations with your partner. This isn't just another budgeting tool, it's a roadmap for building trust and connection. So if you're ready to start a joyful money journey with your partner, go to Midland.us/couplesjoy and download your free guide. Transform your financial future together, starting today. As someone who's had a successful exit, you have shared that it's key to remember that people are still high schoolers at heart. What do you mean by that? Because I think it's a really powerful lesson.
Well, I might even go even a little bit lower in the sense that all of us, from a psychology standpoint, and it's fascinating to review this and research this, we all sort of have a yearning for yesterday. Younger part of our lives when things were better, life was easier. And one of the biggest financial mistakes, and not just financial advisors make, but any leader, whether you own a business, you work for someone, you manage people, so many people make this fatal communication mistake, and they think that they need to use bigger words to sound more authoritative. It'll make them sound more credible and trusting, but often it just creates confusion. And so I would actually go down from high school down to junior high. I would actually go down to elementary school and say, you want to communicate at a third grade level, which is going to sound crazy. But here's what I find if you really think about it. The most successful people in the world, whether they are the hardworking mom, the hardworking dad, the single person, the couple, whatever you're doing, people's lives are so complex these days. The real expert in whatever business you're in listening to this right now, if you want to attract the people you want, if you want to make it rain, connect with pain. And the way you do that is you talk about their painful problem easy enough that a third grader could understand it. Because the last thing people want in their lives is more complication. They want simplification. And so the smartest people actually make the most problematic situations sound surmountable. I like to joke around, I like to say how a brisket is cooked. Talk a little bit lower and a little bit slower. And when you talk a little bit lower and a tad slower, you sound automatically more empathetic and credible and trusting. So the big words, if there's more than 3 or 4 syllables, let's take those out. If it takes more than probably 7 words to describe whatever occupation you're in, what problem you solve for people, probably too long. People have a select amount of brain cells they choose to burn to figure stuff out. You want to make it where they have to burn no brain cells at all to understand how you can help them.
Yeah, we talk about that in our first meeting with families about breaking things down to simplistic concepts. Yes. Because if I was in their shoes and listened to the jargon in this profession, I wouldn't, and I wasn't in it, I wouldn't know what's going on, because it's almost like I feel like it's created this jargon by design to create this false sense that we know something that you don't know. But at the end, everybody can know it. It's just a matter of breaking it down to a point where everybody understands it. So thank you for sharing that. And I mean, where does Good Money Revolution come into this? What was the impetus behind the book, and who's it really for?
Yeah. So when I had my practice, I was a financial advisor for 25 years. And one of the things that I began to hear, especially late in my career, was people would talk about, Derrick, I'm told that money is bad, that if I make a lot of money, I'm a bad person. Like if I want to make more money than I really need, does that make me a bad person? And I said, who's telling you that? We began to really do a deep dive as people thought about this because, again, think about 5-10 years ago, a lot of spotlight on wealthy people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and all these people who've built huge businesses. And I would ask, what about if your life didn't have Amazon in it? I know at our house, I wouldn't see 2 to 3 packages a day show up on the porch, for goodness sakes.
Right.
These people are adding value to our lives. But what I realized is I did a deeper dive. I realized, wait a minute, if people are just making a bulging bank account their number one goal, that leads to burnout. But if you can say, how do I attach and connect money to meaning and purpose to profits and cash to a cause? Well, now what that does is it motivates me to say, I want to go make more money, go make a lot of it by adding value to people's lives so that I can do it to make more opportunity for other people. I can then use that money to give. That's the revolution. And funny story. So one of our clients, a guy named Dave, longtime local business owner, and those clients you've got, Larry, where they don't even have to say a word, but you can just read their body language that something's wrong. And you're so in tune with your clients. I knew that you would connect with that. And he sat down and I said, Dave, I can tell something's bothering you. What's wrong? And he began to unload. He said, Derrick, I don't feel motivated to go in the office anymore. I feel like I'm just going through the motions. And for whatever reason, the words just shot out of my mouth. And I said, Dave, is there a cause that you care about? And he began to tell me a story. And he said, Derrick, a couple years ago, we took our family overseas. And this particular village they went to, he remembered the guide telling them, if only they had a schoolhouse in this village, it would transform economically this entire area. It was so poor. And he remembered exchanging a glance with his wife as if to say, wouldn't it be cool to fund that school? And I said, Dave, what if you did this? What if you set a crazy sales increase goal and you took half of that and used it to fund that school? Suddenly, Larry, his eyes got as big as saucers, a big grin came on his face, and we began to brainstorm what that looked like. So typically I would see clients every 3 months. He came back in like a month later. And I said, Dave, you look like you're 10 years younger. What happened? He said, well, what you said really motivated me. So he mocked up a picture of the school and put it on his website. We call that the generosity purpose. And he began to let his clients know, even prospects know that, hey, when you work with us, you can work with anybody, but when you work with us, you're part of something bigger. And we're going to make and take part of our profits and use it to fund this school. His business began to skyrocket, but most importantly, his team got motivated, but the biggest winner was Dave. Suddenly now Dave had a purpose to what he was doing. Now, when he called people and faced rejection, but to grow the business, he knew I'm doing this because it's bigger than just me. It's part of making a difference in the lives of those people in that village that I might never see again. And so we've used that concept as generosity purpose now, not just with advisors, but every single type of business owner around the country, and even executives in their companies, to say, let's go set our goals that are very, very aggressive, but use it to then do more good with it. That way, it's like the perfect antidote for business burnout.
Yeah, amazing. And I'm sure he was very grateful about that advice you provided and that help and that lift, because I'm sure it gave him his 2.0, which was great. So, Derrick, in the opening, when you're talking about yourself in, entering the profession at such a young age, and I did too, I did so as well. I entered the profession at like 22 or 23. So, how can young professionals use their age to their advantage?
Well, it's interesting you asked that, because I was speaking on a stage just last week in Atlanta, and we did a Q&A session, and one of the advisors asked, Derrick, I'm 24 years old, but I keep feeling like people are questioning my age in their mind. How do I overcome that? And, so many young people are told you just have to wait for your time. You have to wait for the moment, wait a couple years, get experience. Well, I don't buy that. I think being young is like the ultimate superpower. Because if you can articulate and communicate and really connect with people's pain points, if you say it in the right way, you can actually be the biggest door opener for your business. And so I did some coaching with this advisor a couple days later, and I said, tell me what happens when you're in this situation. And she said, well, when someone asks me, what do I do for a living? She said, I would say, I'm a financial advisor. I've got this designation. I went to this school. Here's my experience. And she said, I can just sense that in their mind, they're thinking, are you old enough to drive?
Right.
And I said, well, here's what I want you to do. Next time you feel that way, I said, would you be willing to do something pretty crazy and non-traditional? She said, sure. I have nothing to lose. I said, well, next time you feel like that, call it out. Because when you call out what you think someone is thinking, it neutralizes that thought. And so here's how that played out. She said, well, you know how so many people, they worry about running out of money in retirement, especially high net worth business owners and founders? Well, we help fix that. One of the biggest things that keep them awake at night is the thought of their lazy and entitled kids taking over their business and blowing all their money. And the guy was like, yes, that's exactly right. But then she said, it's so funny because sometimes when I talk to people, I think they're questioning my age in their mind. And this guy started laughing and he was like, yeah, I kind of was. And so then what she said, and this is gold because it's a way to flip the opportunity. She said, in our firm, one of the biggest concerns that a lot of wealthy founders and CEOs have is someone to connect with their kids to teach them how to manage money well. And that's what my expertise is in. And as a matter of fact, because I'm the youngest here, I'm the one that can keep track of all the technology changes going on to make sure the company does well. I think you would love working with our firm. Pause. That gentleman became a client the next week.
I think the way I used to break the ice was I would call it out too. And I would say, just think of it this way. I'm like your grandson or your son. Who's going to look out for you better and take better care of you than your son or your grandson and, have your best interest at heart. And I used to use that all the time. And, you bring up technology, right? Which this generation that you're talking about is they're right in the heat of this and have been using it their entire life. And, in a world now where AI is really all the buzz, you hear about it everywhere you go, no matter what your industry is, they're talking about it. With that going on, you're talking about the power of face-to-face and often leaning into even handwritten notes. Why is that?
Well, I like to say that face-to-face wins the race and voice-to-voice is the best choice. And if you want a business that's booming, focus on the human. So quick story, when I had my practice, and I actually still do this, I would have my assistant put 3 note cards on my keyboard every morning, along with 3 bottles of water. I needed to drink more water and I needed to write more notes. And my goal to myself is I couldn't allow myself to check emails on my keyboard there unless I wrote my notes. Here's what we find. Even if you send a great summary letter in whatever business you're in to follow up after a visit with a prospect, the magic of a handwritten note. Think about this. Picture yourself. When you go outside, wherever your mailbox is, you're going out there and you're thinking about whatever you're thinking about. When you open it, typically people kind of thumb through the mail. The bill, here's a reminder of what I owe, here's an ad. Oh, a handwritten note. And oftentimes they might even open that handwritten note before they even get in the house. And they see the cursive or the print. Someone took some time to write something to them. And oftentimes they may say to the person they love the most in that house, hey, look at what so-and-so sent us. And they both read it together. It might even get put on their refrigerator. And the magic of that note is you get to say something to them that they'll remember. Hey, it was so nice, Larry, to visit with you and Denise. I can see why people love working at your firm. One of the things that's in short supply today are people that care, and you're one of the most caring people I know. I'm so glad to call you my friend. Warm regards, Derrick. You see, a note like that sent to someone you care about or your client or even a prospect, you see, that gets remembered. And in the world of AI, what's going to happen is we're doubling down on what does that mean to me? When you think about high tech, the focus is high touch. Does it mean slower? Yes. But if you want the people to really connect with you, I believe the handwritten note and personal items like that, we used to identify what are people's hobbies. If they had a free Saturday, what would you do the entire day on a free Saturday. And I would just take notes. And throughout the relationship, we might drop a gift card into the rafting company or send them an article on, hey, here's a college that they're thinking about for their grandkids, where people like, boy, these people just care about us. Because the reality is, whatever business you're in right now, you might have just picked up your newest client and you're celebrating, you're popping the champagne. But here's the reality. Your newest client is someone else's newest and hottest prospect. And if you're not connecting more than just in the business you're doing and more in solving the problem, actually they feel like you truly care about them, you might be vulnerable to losing them to the competition. And I can't let that happen to you.
Yeah, that's about right. That's great advice. Great advice. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of a shift for a second and get personal. So can I ask you a personal question?
Of course. I love the way you answer that too.
Well, that's my question. So, I hear you talk about starting with, can I ask you a personal question, being a great opening that deepens connections. Why is that?
Well, one of the things that we find, and again, this is not just for financial advisors, but if you're listening and you're in any type of consultative selling, you got to realize the game you're truly playing. And that is, how fast can you build rapport and relationship with a prospect? You're causing people to burn brain cells if they don't understand the problem you solve. But the goal is, how do you connect with them fast? And one of the best ways is, I like to always ask people at the beginning, hey, what's the greatest service that we can provide for you? Then they tell you what that is. But I like to ask at least 2 personal questions. And here are 2 of my favorites. And again, customize this for whatever business you're in. Hey, what would you say is the biggest financial mistake you've ever made? Second one, of all the financial decisions you've made, what's one decision that you're most proud of? Now, by itself, those are pretty decent questions. I think we'd agree on that. But they're still, in my opinion, they're still swimming in the shallow end of the pool. And so I want you to walk with me for a second. We're going to walk down to the deep end of the pool where we build deeper rapport and relationship. Okay, so we need to ask questions that make people feel a little bit uncomfortable, even make you feel uncomfortable asking them. So we've got to specifically call out incoming personal question. And here's how we do that. So Larry, if I'm going to ask you a personal question, I would say something like, Larry, would you mind if I asked you a personal question? And by the way, you don't have to answer it if you don't want to. What would you say is the biggest financial mistake you've ever made? Pause. Now, see, what I did there was, just like you did, is I shifted the narrative to say, we're now going to define this. I call that giving it pre-meaning. You want to give a personal question pre-meaning, labeling it as, you mind if I ask you a personal question? You see my tone change. I went a little bit lower, a little bit slower. And by the way, you don't have to answer it if you don't want to. Well, that sparks major curiosity. And what happens in the mind of a prospect in whatever business you're in, whatever you're going to ask next will never be as bad as what they think you're going to ask. Okay. Now, you might be thinking, well, Derrick, what if someone objects to asking a personal question? What if they take offense at that and don't want to do it? Just simply say something like this. No problem. I completely understand. Here's why I wanted to ask you a personal question. All the work we do, all it is about money, and insert whatever it is about your business, ultimately, this is about relationships. And we want to make sure that we don't recreate the problems you've had at your current firm when you come to work with us. This is a long-term deal. We want to make sure that we understand you at a deep level. Does that make sense? Do you feel comfortable with that? Yeah, okay. And then you go in for the personal question. The whole point is that if you ask and stay at the surface of, tell me about your investments or tell me about your life or your account, you don't truly go down to the depths because you're building rapport and relationship fast. Typically within an hour, the personal question, I find, is the number one way to do that.
That's great. Great advice. And I love that. And just the framework around that is excellent. And I could see how you get people open up and really get those nuggets that you find in the deep end, when having those conversations. So thank you for sharing that. Now, as a guy myself who wears a Joy t-shirt at conferences, I have to ask, and I will preface this by saying I did up my own attire today because I knew what the game you would be bringing today. So I changed things up a little bit, but I have to ask, where do your outfits come from? And, what led to this changed for you, or are you leading with this as, being the guy that dresses this way?
Yeah. So I love to wear Robert Graham shirts. And so that's what this shirt is right here. I probably have about 75 of them in my closet. I wear them so much. Now, if I ask, Robert Graham will send me free shirts as well, because it's good advertising for them with our social media audience and so forth. But one of the things that I like to do, and this is going to sound very, very simple, but when I coach or speak or give advice to people, and then they pay me well to do it, I always want to make sure that I'm in the game myself, that I'm teaching them to do better in the game they're playing. In other words, I need to be in the arena myself. And so I do this because when I go on TV or I do podcasts and I do various things, and I'm coaching other people to do the same thing, I want to teach them the principle that memorable people make the most money. You see, the game you're playing is, how can you be remembered quickly, not just in solving a unique problem and specializing in something unique, but the person dressed well. There was something memorable about them. So when they need to call you in the sea of other advisors, business owners, entrepreneurs, they think about, yeah, that person dresses really well. I love the way they dress. And so people connect with those types of things emotionally. Like when I was an advisor, I was a pure jacket and tie and cufflink guy. And one guidance I got was, now, Derrick, you technically have left that. You are no longer a financial advisor. Now you're a speaker and a coach and you're a media person. So let's come up with a new persona. And so by dressing like this, it reminds me I am not who I once was. I am a new person in this new role. And so I would just tell people that sometimes the way you dress can change mentally how you think and execute ideas. Your mind, if you dress like you dressed in the previous opportunity, you're going to think like you did in the previous opportunity. Sometimes just dressing different causes you to think different, and you can be bolder for a few seconds, and often that's all that you need to snag that next opportunity.
All right. Well, I hope I upped my game today for you, because I tried to do my best.
Your shirt looks great. Matter of fact, I commented when we came on the air. It looks really good.
Yeah, it's not a Robert Graham. It's a Travis Matthew. And if he wants to send me shirts, I'd be happy to wear them on my podcast, because I do love them, and I'm starting to wear them on the show. So I'd love that. But definitely are memorable, because I see you wearing those all the time. And I know when I see from afar those designs, I know exactly who's in the room. So you got that right. But, Derrick, listen, this has brought me a lot of joy. And we ask each of our guests the same final question, which our listeners are always waiting to hear, because the answers are so vast and different every time. And that is, what did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
Well, I'll just be candid. I work out with a trainer twice a week. And so this morning, worked out with my wife, and one of our daughters comes to work out with us. And so I actually just had this epiphany, literally, as I'm doing curls. My daughter was doing curls. My wife is doing some lunges over here. I'm thinking it's kind of cool that we have a family that puts exercise as a central part of our lives. And it's also cool to think that, I'm 55 years old. I want to make sure I'm an example for my daughters always. And I want to make sure that my wife knows that I'm still doing the hustle. And so that gave me joy. And so that was this morning. And it just motivates me that, and I live by this mantra a lot, Larry, and that is, if I did it once, then I can do it again. And sometimes I just need a couple seconds of that reminder to face something hard with a mentality of courage. And if I work out, I did something most other people didn't do, I can do the next hard thing.
Yeah. Well, if we're all here, we all survived the hardest days of our lives, right?
Exactly right.
So just another way to look at it. Well, listen, Derrick, it's been amazing having you on the show, and we're going to have all of your information in the show notes. But if people want to learn more about you, connect with you, find the book, Good Money Revolution, what's the easiest and the best way for them to do that?
The best way is to go on Instagram. You can find me at Derrick Kinney. Also, if you are on LinkedIn, that's become our most popular platform with business owners and entrepreneurs at Derrick Kinney as well.
Awesome. Derrick, I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking out time in your busy schedule to share this time with us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Larry. This was a real pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Derrick, thank you for sharing your wisdom and contagious optimism with us today. Your message that money isn't just about wealth, it's about doing good and living with purpose is exactly what the world needs right now. You've reminded us that success and generosity can go hand in hand, and that true prosperity begins with a joyful mindset. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Midland Money Mindset and calling you my friend. Derrick Kinney and all he is up to can be found across most social media platforms. All the contact information needed to find them can be found in the show notes.